Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. And today, guys, we're going to talk about um, Doc's opening up his eighth office. There, there's some other projects in the works that I know of. We're not going to get into, but I have a feeling by the end of Q2, we'll be talking about more practices opening from Dr. Vallo. But right now, the near target is practice eight. Doc Vallo opens up practices and they're all startups or they're like shells of what used to be a practice and he snatches them up real cheap. And this is very consistent across the board. Month one, his practices are open. They do mature practice numbers. So he opens up GP practices that do 100,000 plus month one. He does implant practices that do the $200,000 plus month one. And now he's going to move into practice number eight. So Doc, how did this come about? I know you're always like you're kind of always on the scan. Like realtors call you and say, "Hey, I got a location," and you never even look at it. You just say yes. So first, like, how did practice number eight come about, and what are the challenges you're getting hit with as you're trying to get this open? And now, as being the CEO of the group and putting down the handpiece, how different is it? Because I think this is the first practice since you hung up the handpiece that we're opening that you're 100% not a dentist. I think this might be the first one, or you're just starting it. But just tell us first, how did it come about, and what were the challenges?
So I guess first of all, so we just opened three practices. We're right now we're at the end of January. We opened two practices in mid to late December, and we opened a third practice in early mid January. So that was kind of like the three we had just opened, like this year or whatever. But this is the fourth one, and this one was when this one came about. I already had started the little minor renovations we were doing for two of the startups. And I was working on trying to get a LOI signed for the lease. We were basically purchasing the equipment. So Tamarack, that's our Fort Lauderdale office. We were working on getting that signed. And it wasn't 100% a done deal yet, but it was getting pretty close to the point it looked like it was going to happen. And me just kind of I was looking at the listings in Southeast Florida, kind of almost thinking like, in case Tamarack doesn't go through, let's see if there's any backup options. And I happened to come across another practice in another part of Southeast Florida that was very similar to the Tamarack opportunity. So in my mind, I was kind of thinking like, okay, well, this could be a good backup opportunity. And at the same time, even if Tamarack does go through, maybe we'll do another practice, so we can kind of get, two locations down in that general Southeast Florida region. So I had seen this on the site. I was actually talking to it was the same broker that I was using for the Tamarack deal. So I was talking about this practice, or I mentioned this practice. Hey, is this one still for sale? He said, yeah, no, it is. And I said, I think I might be interested in that one too. So we started talking about it. Similar situation. It was an old dental practice. The dentist had kind of slowed down, so wasn't doing any crazy numbers. Seeing, he wasn't really seeing new patients, and his patient base kind of dwindled. Smaller office, four operatories, a little bit older, but we had Banco go check out the equipment, and it was all in working order. So they had wanted, the asking price initially was 115,000 for the practice. And so I said, okay, that pretty cheap. Basically, they weren't even including the patients in part of the sale, and it was essentially 115,000 for the equipment, the space that was built out, whatever. And I'll tell you guys, like, in all honesty, is used dental equipment worth 115,000? Probably not. Like, if this guy was to piecemeal his equipment and try to sell it, dental marketplaces or whatever, would he get 115,000 for, the supplies, small equipment, four rooms equipped? Probably not. But here's what you got to think about. Like, so this is, anytime we find these smaller practices, they're for our implant offices. If I were to find, and I've done this before, but if I were to find a space that I wanted to do a startup practice in that wasn't already built out for dental, and I had to do the build out and buy all the equipment, even for a smaller four op space, even with some of the tips and tricks and stuff that I've learned along the way, by the time you get all that stuff and you buy, the extra equipment, the CBCT, the Sprint Ray, the Trios, all that, I mean, you're probably looking at like a minimum spend of like 450, 500,000, even for a smaller startup at this point, especially some of that technology. And you got to think about the timeline. I mean, you're looking at a minimum 12, more likely 18 to 24 months even timeline that you're waiting for all this stuff to be done, and delays and stress and permitting and yada 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 yada. But for 115,000, I can buy this practice. He's thrown in the patients, which we're going to probably do some kind of hybrid model with the patients that are there. And we'll probably, if their hygienist wants to stay on, we'll probably keep them on part time, and we'll do a hygiene day or so, and we'll do our days focus on the implants and implant consults. But 115,000 for the equipment, the build out, all that stuff. It doesn't have the CBCT, so I got to buy that. It's 50 grand. Doesn't have the Sprint Ray, the Trios set up. That's like another 35 all in for all the different fixins and stuff. So, another $85,000 on the 115. We're right at 200K. And then, okay, got to do like the normal stuff, signage, legal, whatever else. But anyways, I'm taking out a $250,000 loan for this practice, and we're not going to spend much more than that, if much more than that at all, to get this thing open. With a larger group, the other practices can cash flow for a little. So that's a nice thing. As you start to grow and you've got profitable practices, they can help cash flow if there's a little bit of a gap between what you get in lending. So I try to get, when I first started, and this is opposite advice. If you're doing your first startup, take as much money as the bank will give you. Unless you've got a bunch of cash sitting somewhere, you would rather have more money. You'd rather have an excess. You want to make sure you have plenty of working capital, because if things are more expensive than you think, if there's more delays, if the beginning of the practice is slower than you were hoping for and you're not cash flowing, you can get yourself in a bad situation, and it can be tougher to go back and ask for more money at that point in time. So you're better off. And I did the same thing. I took as much money. My first startup, 2021, I took out 600 grand, which was the most the bank would give me for that startup. Now, as you've grown and you've got other offices to cash flow, you don't necessarily have to go crazy. And so I'm kind of taking out what I expect it will be. Maybe I stay a little bit on the lower end of that. And I know that my practice can cash flow a little bit if needed, but that makes my lending go further so I can get more loans and do more startups. So anyways, 250K, give or take, essentially the same we did for the Tamarack office. We can get this implant office open off the ground. We're kind of getting some patients for free with it. So it was a cool scenario. We started working on negotiations early on, and the speed bump we were running into at the beginning was the real estate. So a lot of times you see a practice for sale, and the real estate is not for sale with the practice. And a lot of dentists that bums them out. They're looking for a practice where they can also be their own landlord, buy the real estate. I'm actually looking for the opposite. I am looking for just to buy the practice, or to sign a. Sometimes I've done it where there's not even a practice for sale; it's just an empty old dental space. Sign the lease. I do not want the real estate, and I've had different friends, different people in the dental community tell me, like, this was my hot seat at my mastermind group, the Dental Success Institute DSI with Dr. Costas. I'm sitting in my mastermind group at this last session in Scottsdale in January. And one of my points that I'm discussing is like, guys, I don't know what to do here. This practice is for sale with the real estate, and the seller wants to sell the real estate. So he did not want to just lease it to me. And what do I do? And the answers that I was getting was like, why don't you just buy the real estate? But like, sounds like a great deal. You should do it. Real estate was $485,000. It wasn't anything crazy. I could have totally bought the real estate. But again, in my mind, I see the bigger picture. I see the growth of my group, and I know that any real estate I buy is going to bog us down with either more debt or less cash, which are both bad things if you're trying to rapidly grow your dental group. So I 100% adamant, I do not want to buy the real estate. So initially, what happened was one of my associate docs, great doctor, and I'm not going to throw any shade to him on this podcast. So I don't want, I'm sure he's going to listen to this. He had mentioned previously that he is interested in getting into commercial real estate. And if we ever found a space, let him know. So I reached out to him, kind of told him about the opportunity. He was interested. We let the seller know, hey, this is what we're planning to do. This is my offer. And we're going to have this other doctor buy the real estate. And seller was a little bit hesitant at first, and I guess he had got a couple other offers in where they were going to buy the practice and the real estate. But the broker kind of spoke in my favor. He talked about what I've done with my group, the stability that I've got, and the fact that I can self fund the practice where everyone else has to worry about getting the full loan, and are they going to get the full amount and all that stuff, because they were younger docs, the other offers. So anyways, the basically I was able to get the deal pushed through. Seller agreed to sell me the practice, and my associate was going to be our landlord. It was kind of a cool scenario. Unfortunately, my associate ran into some issues getting the lending, and something that I have told him, and we'll tell him again, but he had been kind of subscribing to the Dave Ramsey idea of paying down debt. So he's making great money in our office. He's one of our implant docs. He's doing awesome stuff. But he was taking all that excess, production pay and paying down debt on, student loans, mortgage, whatever it was. So he wasn't packing away much for cash. And so that was the issue he ran into, even though he's like telling the banks, hey, banks, look at all this debt I've paid down. I don't really have much debt at this point in time. And look at the income I'm making. Unfortunately, just because the income stream maybe wasn't long enough history of it, and because he didn't have enough for them to make them comfortable, enough cash in the bank, he was having trouble getting that loan to go through. And he talked to a few different banks, and some of them said, hey, if you were buying if you were going to be the practice owner, we could do this as a dental deal, but as an investment deal, we want to see more cash, and whatever else it was. So, and obviously he was going to have to put a portion of cash down, and so they were also counting that against him. So long story short, this went on for about a month. We were trying to get he was trying to secure this loan. This went on through the holidays, and we got right to the end of the holidays here, and the seller was starting to get anxious, because we had signed an LOI. We were kind of getting the end of that due diligence period, and my associate was still having trouble. And so I was trying to buy some time with the broker and the seller to see if my associate could figure it out. We had a few conversations about it, and eventually got to the point where he's like, hey man, I don't want to hold this deal back for you. I don't know how this is going to shake out in the end. If I do end up getting a loan, it's probably going to take longer than I had hoped. So he said, if you want to look for somebody else, that might be the better option. And I'm sorry, I didn't think I was going to run into these issues, blah blah blah. So again, no issue, no problem. And I told him, I was like, listen, man, like, don't even like worry about this for 1 second. I promise you, I'm going to either one, I'm going to figure something out, or two, it wasn't meant to be. Obviously we were opening 3 other practices at the time. I didn't feel that stress that this deal had to happen. But at the same time, I'm also not one to give up easily. I feel like I can be resourceful. And it was a good opportunity. And at that point, we already had a doctor who wanted to, be the implant doc for that office, and had already, signed a contract. So I wanted to make sure that things were going to go through for him. He was great. We were excited to have him join us. So I started talking to some other friends I have. I started talking to some other dentists that I know, that are successful and interested in investments. And I actually found a few that were interested in purchasing it, and they weren't going to have an issue either with the loan, or maybe even they were going to pay cash. So I went back to broker. I told him what was going on. I told him that I had like 3 backup offers in place, and I said, I am certain we can make something work. I'm happy to put a deposit down on the practice purchase so that the seller knows I'm serious. And, if he can just give us a little more time, we'll figure this out. So, but I told him, I said, if the seller doesn't want to go through another potential real estate buyer, I have another offer I can make him. I will increase my purchase price for the practice to $150,000, which, from 115, okay, like it's a little bit more money, but still, guys, again, we're getting this practice, we're doing this quote unquote implant startup for super cheap. I had no problem increasing the asking price there to try to get the deal done. And on top of that, if he keeps the real estate and is my landlord, then what we can do is, like, this is the numbers I'd already agreed to for the rent with my friend who was going to buy the building. I will give him those same terms. I think they're pretty favorable. And this is how much money he can make over the course of the next 10-year lease. And he'll still have that appreciating asset in the real estate too. So I sent the broker, I did the math for the seller. I was like, this is what you'll make selling it right now to another buyer who's going to buy the real estate and buy the practice for 115. This is what you'll make right now selling it to me, more money for the practice. And this is what you'll make each year for the next 10 years on the he had already paid off the real estate, so it was all just income coming into him. This is how much you'll make each year as a landlord. And at the end of that time or whatever, you're still going to own the asset, the real estate. So I gave the broker some ammo. He went back to the seller. He kind of gave him both options. And the seller was like, I don't really want to wait for another potential person to come in and buy the real estate, but I'm intrigued by the second offer. So he took a few days to think about it and decided that was the way he wanted to go. And we signed a new LOI at the higher purchase price. And now the seller is working on creating the lease for me, and the attorneys are working on the APA agreement and all that stuff. So we ran into a few obstacles. It was an interesting road, but at the end of the day, it seems like things are going to work out nicely. And honestly, I think it's going to be a win-win for the seller of the practice, as well as it's going to be for our group here. So,
This has been like, man, it's like we're always looking at practices and locations and stuff. Like, how excited just are you for number 8? Like, when docs like look at doing the multi-practice thing, there's all kinds of anxieties about it, right? There's like, I have to restaff, I have to do all these things, I have to rebuild systems, processes. It's located over there. There's a geographical anxiety, right? Like, there's a lot of I would say in this onion of opening a practice, there are more anxieties about those things than there are excitements. So where do you focus your excitement? Like, what is the finish line that gets you pumped up about a practice to want to pursue it like the way you do? Because you pursue this like a pit bull grabbing onto something. Like, you lock your jaws on opening a practice, and it tries to get away from you, and you shake your head and you beat it to submission, and you get it open, and you get it doing what they, there's so many layers of anxiety for this. What is the thing that you kind of fixate in your brain that makes you pursue the mission so hard?
Matt, I was actually thinking about this just actually earlier this morning, but I've realized as you open more practices, there's less highs and less lows. So, when I first opened my first startup, it was like, one of the most exciting days of my life. I've been working for this for so long. Felt like, you're kind of making that dream come true, self-made, entrepreneur, business owner, all that cool stuff. And then as I open subsequent practices, I think, it's not that you're not excited, but I think it's just kind of like another day, another step in the progression of your business, whatever it is. It doesn't quite carry the same excitement that it does, I think, opening your first or maybe even your second practice. However, there's also less lows. So there's less work on your plate for each office because you've got a lot more help, executive team and office man. We our new system is boots on the ground early. So we're currently trying to figure out if we're going to keep somebody from that practice or if we're going to hire a office manager from outside. But either way, we're going to have somebody who has boots on the ground there before we actually, open our doors, start training, whatever it is. They're going to get things ready through the transition for us. They're going to do training with the team. I still haven't been down to our Tamarack office, which opened over a month ago, to check it out, just because it's 4 hours away from me. And we've had other people that have went down there. We had an office manager that went down there. At some point, I'm sure I'll go down and visit both of these practices. I'll do a Southeast Florida trip. But the nice thing is, again, as you grow more, you've got less on your plate, you've got more help, and the stressors are a little bit less stressful. I'm not saying that they're not stressful. Don't get me wrong. I've got 7 other practices I got to worry about. 3 of them are essentially brand new, fledgling. We're trying to fill the schedule week in and week out with new patients. My other practices, I mean, things are still growing. I mean, some of them are implant where you don't really rely on a recall system. So again, constantly need to flood them with new patients. There's HR issues. There's, financing you got to secure. The bigger you get, the more stuff costs. I mean, guys, There are months where our credit card bill for the group is over $300,000, and sometimes the credit card bill hits like the same week. It often actually does hit like the same week as one of our big production bonus payrolls for our doctors. So I mean, we can have payroll that's well over $100,000 for the week. That week, and then the same week we could have a $300,000 credit. You're talking 400 grand that's just zapped out of the business bank accounts just like that. So there definitely is stress, but I think again, as you're on a bigger scale, each of those things just it doesn't quite impact you quite as much. So it's like, something's delayed, something's not going to get there on time. You have This was interesting. One of our recent startups that we just opened, actually the one we literally just opened a couple of weeks ago here in January, the person we had hired for the treatment coordinator for the office texted that she was quitting the night before opening day. So we had hired this treatment coordinator after interviewing a bunch and vetting them all. And, we do multi-level interviews now, and they went through training. And literally the night before we're opening our doors and we've got a schedule full of new patients the next day, she texted our operations officer saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I guess some kind of family issue was going on," and she's like, I can't be working right now, so unfortunately I've got to step away. And you talk about bad timing, you're like, oh my goodness. Like that same week, one of our hygienists for another location, unfortunately, her mom passed away, so she had to step away for about 2 weeks. And this is an office where we only had one hygienist. So, again, if you rewind 3, 4 years and you're thinking about, Andrew, when I first opened my first startup or the second startup, and I've got a much smaller team, you've got issues like this come up. I mean, like you're not sleeping at night, you're struggling to eat, you're just anxious all the time. And I think you kind of develop a thicker skin to these things. You realize that there's kind of just this ebb and flow in life, and every single week, good things are going to happen, and every single week, bad things are going to happen. And it's just part of being a business owner, part of living life. And rather than stressing out, rather than dwelling, rather than the victim mentality of "woe is me," why is this happening to me? When it rains, it pours. Like rather than getting that mentality that I sometimes used to get sucked into, I think now I get the mentality of, okay, so what are we going to do? Do we have coverage from a temp hygienist yet? We do. Okay, great. And do we have coverage for next week in case she's not going to be back next week? Yep, we already got people that can come in next week. Okay, great. What are we going to do for the treatment coordinator position? Oh, we've got one of our floaters who's kind of cross trained. He is honestly he's incredible. He can do dental assisting, treatment coordinating, front desk, kind of managerial duties. And he just kind of goes where needed for our practices. Again, the advantage of being a bigger group, you can have people like that. We've got him at that practice for the first 2 weeks or whatever. So he's going to help present treatment and help them out with stuff and whatnot. Okay, great. So again, bases covered. So I think that's the advantage. The disadvantage is it's not quite as exciting. You don't get quite as much achievement or joy or whatever it is, because at this point you've been doing it for a while, and you're just kind of used to it. So I think some of the shiny newness kind of wears off of opening a new practice, but you also take away a lot of the stress and anxiety from it too.
It's an intimidating thing for so many docs, and you find this way to package it up and make each one so exciting. Like, you know, on a personal level, like, is the anxiety getting just less with every one you do? Is the excitement getting more, or like, because I know we talked recently, and you told me, and I hope this is okay to share. Your dad is your CFO, and you asked your
Yeah,
dad,
yeah,
"Am I
yeah,
biting off more
yeah,
than you can chew?" And your dad said, "No, you're good." Right? And it's
yeah.
like, is it because now you've done it 7 times? Like, is number 8 just like no big deal now? Is number 8 like, or is it still the same? Like when you call that realtor and you make a offer, you call that broker and make an offer. Like, is there like a, oh man, what am I doing again? Or is it like, yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, I mean, I think you feel a little bit less risk of like that total failure, because you're like, you know what, we've got we've got some offices that are just rocking and rolling. So I think it kind of makes that worst case scenario like not as scary. You play that game. Okay, worst case scenario, new startups are slow, and this doesn't, or you have an associate, or whatever it is. Like, what's worst case scenario right now? And when you've got some healthy that practices that are a little more mature, and our mature practices, guys, are like, going on 4 years old, going on 2 years old, whatever it is. But like doing some seriously healthy, mature numbers are, our flagship office did 3.5 million last year in collections. Goal for this year is to break 4 million. Our implant practice that literally opened last January 2024, in its first 12 months did 2.5 million. This year the goal is to break 3 million. So we've got a couple of these powerhouse mature practices that are profitable.
2.5 million as an implant practice is like doing 4 million as a GP with implants mixed in.
One doctor, no hygiene, 4 days a week, first 12 months, 2.5 million in collections. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the cool thing is when we had kind of our, like, my annual meeting with that doctor, I was like, so I don't really have like any negatives to talk about with you, which is kind of, weird. Usually with associates, there's at least a couple things we got to talk about, but I mean, he's doing a great job, living the core values, being a leader. Patients love him, treat high quality treatment, clothes and stuff. So I'm like, rather than focusing on like these areas that we need to maybe focus on or work on, like let's bring this conversation to another level, and like, how can we level up from here? I mean, 2.5 million, 4 days a week, implant office, one doctor, no hygienist. I mean, there's only so many arches that you can do in a given week. And unless you want to add, another day of dentistry, which was something we talked about, maybe adding Friday a month or something like that. Unless you want to do that, like, there's only so much room for leveling up. So like, what ideas do we have to even take things to the next level? So like, that was a fun, annual review where we got to talk about some cool ideas to say, hey, 3 million's great, but like, I think we can even get this 3.5. Like what can we do to even take things up another notch? So like, that was fun. But I digress. Like, the whole point is that we've got some nice offices supporting things. So if you play the worst case scenario game, we're probably still going to be okay. But at the same time, obviously, a lot of effort, a lot of risk, a lot of investment, a lot of time went into creating this group, and we've got a good thing. So it's like, I don't want to screw it up either. So like, I think that is my bigger fear. It's not like, oh my God, we're going to lose everything, we're going to go bankrupt. It's more like, we've got this nice, growing, profitable group. I don't want to grow faster than our systems and everything can keep up with. And I don't want to all of a sudden have this larger, unprofitable group that's just kind of turning a lot, big top line number and small bottom line numbers. So like, that's my bigger fear. But I'm doing everything I can to try to make sure it doesn't happen. And guys, to be fair, when you're growing aggressively, it is going to have some impact on your profitability. It's tough to get around that, especially if you're trying to intentionally bring a lot of new patients in and start things off well, and you're investing $15,000 a month per office in these brand new offices that aren't really cash flowing much yet. You got to wait for insurances to pay and all that stuff. So it'll have some impact, but you don't want to outkick your coverage. You want to make sure that your team is growing to keep up with it, your leadership team, your systems are growing to keep up with it. And that's the conversations I have with the lenders. We work with Huntington, and I think there are definitely times where they maybe feel like we're growing faster than we should. I can tell you we're growing faster than just about any other client they've ever had. And they work with some bigger groups. But I think just the fact that, this has been less than 4 years, I went from 0 to 8 offices. I think sometimes they get a little bit timid about it, and so I've got to kind of show them that I've got this under control, and all of our projections and formulas and all that good stuff. But yeah, I guess that's my long-winded answer to that question. So anyways, guys, we're talking about this new office and all the kind of issues we went through with the purchase agreement and the real estate, and now we're leasing it instead of having somebody else buy it and be our landlord. I kid you not, the day that the seller agreed to keep the real estate and be our landlord, I got a call from the doctor that we had hired to work at this office to tell me that unfortunately he was having a bit of a family crisis, and his family was now planning to very quickly move from Florida to Missouri. So, unfortunately, stuff happens, guys. And I told him, I was like, listen, man, you got to do what you got to do. Family is number one. It's most important. Obviously, we're excited to work with you. If something changes quickly, let me know. We're still happy to keep you on. And I even said to him, I was like, listen, man, like if you, because he has said, I really want this job. I really do. I think it's kind of his wife that was pushing the move, and it was some stuff going on with her family back home, and she wanted to get back there. It's like, I really, really want this job. This is like, I love surgery. This is what I've been looking for. I really like you and your partner. I want to work with you guys. I want to build this together. But I just don't know. I don't know that I can commit and all this stuff. So I said, listen, if you want, like, one, I appreciate your transparency. We are willing to still stick with you because he was going to stick around at least for a while, even if his wife left earlier because his daughter was finishing school. Said, if you want to stick around for the short term, even if you don't know what's going to happen long term, I'm okay with that, and we can start this practice, and maybe things change, and all of a sudden you guys aren't moving, and maybe you and your wife can see how successful that you are in this practice, and the type of income you can make, and maybe it doesn't make sense to leave anymore. But if you get to that point and you're like, you know what, I can't, we got to move, or my wife's already moved and I got to follow her, whatever it is, that's fine. We'll, at that point, we'll look for somebody else, and we're okay going in eyes wide open. I said, but if we're going to do this, I want you to commit that you're going to be there for at least like 8 months before you make that decision. Like, I want you to give it enough time to really, for the office to grow and your surgeries to grow, and for you to see what's really possible, and for us to, kind of before we take on a transition. I said, if you can't commit to, at least 8 months doing this, then maybe it is best. And so he talked to his wife. He thought about it for about a week, and he said, you know what, I really appreciate you guys wanting to work with me. I just, right now with everything going on, I can't even commit to 8 months. So we said, okay, no hard feelings. If anything changes in the future, we'd love to work with you. And that's another piece of advice, guys. I think sometimes people get like offended or take it personally. And, obviously this
I
case,
think they think it's a critical failure. I think what happens
yeah,
is, like, I have docs call me all the time, like, hey, the associate's going to hire, something happened. What am I going to do? So what are you going to do? You're going to go put out another ad and find another associate. That's not the only fish in the sea. Like, I think a lot of times these things happen and people can't recover from the curveball.
I agree, man. I think in general, we take things too personally. And obviously in this case, you can't get mad at someone for a family, issue, whatever. And again, family's got to be first. But even if it wasn't a family issue, even if it was just like, hey, I don't think this is the right fit for me anymore, whatever else it is, like the point is, like, you want people working with you that want to be there. And if for some reason they don't think it's a good fit anymore, then it's not a good fit. Now, at the same time, we do build in notice periods in our contracts so that something doesn't happen where you open. And guys, this is important, I think, in all practices. You want to have that time for the transition, but I think it's extra important if you're going to build a associate driven group, because guys, this practice is 5 hours away from us. We got a specialty doc doing implants. If all of a sudden one day is like, you know what, this just isn't working out, and you don't have some kind of protection. So we actually, our implant docs, we're a little more strict. We do 120-day notice periods, which I know, my good friend, Dr. Nacho, Dr. Goodman, isn't a big fan of those long notice periods. But I mean, honestly, for us, I think it's essential. I've had one doc. Again, I've hired over a dozen docs in the last 4 years. I've had one doc leave on their own, and it was because they went to buy a practice. That was the only reason we've ever had. I have unfortunately had to let a couple other docs go just because they weren't the right fit. But in general, I mean, I think we create a great opportunity, a good environment, good support systems, all that stuff. So I'm not so worried about people leaving or wanting to leave, but you've got to protect yourself. And I tell them that, like, we have these conversations when we're interviewing docs and when we're talking about the contracts and stuff. Sometimes they get a little bit, one, kind of like the DSOs are evil in the Facebook groups. I think there's kind of this narrative that notice periods are evil, and if it's not a good fit, you should just let your associates leave. And I disagree with that. I'm sorry, Paul. That's just one of those things I disagree with you on. I still love you, brother, but I really do feel like you've got to protect the business. You got to protect the practice, and especially these implant practices where, it can be tougher. There's only so many docs that can do these, advanced full arch cases and surgeries. And if you have a doc just leave on a whim, you're in a really tough place to try to get somebody else in there. You might be shutting the practice down for a period of time. And what are you going to do with the team that's in there? You might have to replace the entire team too, and you're still paying rent. And so it's just like you got to protect the business. And here's my other view on it. I've worked in like 4 different offices before in all different types of dental practices before I opened my first practice. There were some that were definitely better than others. There was never an opportunity that, or never an office that was so bad that it's like, I can't do another day of this. I mean, guys, like people act like it's being in prison. People act like, oh my God, that's ridiculous that the doctor has to work for 3 or 4 months if they don't like it. Guys, it's not like they're in prison. They're coming in, they're doing dentistry, they're going home. Maybe it's not the right fit. Maybe they're not as busy as they were hoping to be. Maybe it's a farther drive than they thought it was going to be, and the commute's weighing them down. I mean, I there's a lot of different things that be going on, but like in my mind, if I had a commitment, a contract, whatever, I can suck it up and finish it out for a couple months. It's not the end of the world.
Well, and also that doc that is willing to suck it up and finish the contract out might end up being the right doc because they have an intestinal fortitude to drive forward for the mission, and maybe they'll have a change of heart by the end of it.
Yep.
Maybe they'll be like, you know what, I realize it's a great opportunity being at this practice. You know what I mean? Like there's like a courting period that really matters between associate and owner doc, or owner of the DSO. Like that courting period matters. And this kind of ensures the courting period.
So once again, man, this happened. No lost sleep, no second doubts, no, oh my God, do I still want to go through with this? Called my partner, who he's the one who really vets these implant docs for us because he's a periodontist. So he basically vets them, and then once he's like got his 1 or 2 favorites, like then I'll talk to them. But anyways, I told him what's going on. I said I'm gonna open a new Indeed posting today, and I'll start sending you docs. Within a week, we had like 6 strong candidates on paper, and my partner vetted them all. And from those 6, there were 3 really strong candidates that all could start pretty quickly. And we've actually already got an offer out. Actually, no, an offer is going out today. When I get time, I'm going to send the email offer out. And by the time this is released, I am certain we will have a new doc and contract that can start and not delay the office or anything like that. So part of this episode was to give you guys a little bit of insight on my newest office, my 8th office. Part of it was to show you guys resilience, resourcefulness, grit. One of the core values of my dental group is grit. To me, and I've said this before, I feel like that is the value that has gotten me further than anything else. I really, really do. I mindset's everything. Abundance mindset's important, but like it's just no matter what has ever happened in the course of being a business owner, I've never allowed it to slow me down, and I've never retreated. I've always faced it head on. One of my mentors in my mastermind group, Dr. Jason Tenori, he likes to say the saying "into the storm." That's kind of his mantra for his group. So whatever conflict is going on, we're going to face it head on. We're going to go into the storm. We're going to, we're going to compete. We're going to battle it. And so that's what I try to take. And that's what I try to take in this situation. First, wants to sell the real estate. Okay, I'll find someone who wants to buy the real estate. Real estate purchaser falls through. I'll find backup options to purchase the real estate, and I'll come back with a different offer, get that pushed through. Doctor, has to leave for family emergencies. We'll get new ads up. We'll find other doctors. So, and I'm sure before the doors open to that practice, there will be other issues that happen, and we will also face them head on. So,
Hey guys, this is a great episode. Doc is opening up practice 8, which is super exciting. Watching Andrew open these practices and see such a consistent result across the board. I was actually at Dental Podfest, and somebody walked up to me, and they've been following Andrew for a few years, and they're like, how does Andrew consistently do it? And I just explained a few things. I think one thing that's really critical is Andrew understands that marketing budget is like the gas pedal in a car. He knows there's times to press it when you're on a straightaway to catch up to another race car and overtake them. And there's times when you're in a curve to let off it and hit the brake a little bit while you're sliding around the curve and then hit the gas again. And he's figured that out, that like the throttle for growth, one of the things that's really important is marketing budget. and he is very proactive in how he uses it and yields it, and that's what gets him these consistent results. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. It was really exciting. Please hit like, subscribe, follow, and leave us a review. Thank you, and have a great day.